Well, I think all over the world, the idea of liberalism, which basically means of freedom of the individual to live his or her own life as they see fit, is for many people a scary idea. Because then you don't quite know where does that lead to. So people, and this is I think a human feeling, we like to have control and we like to know the future. It is hard for us to accept that only God knows the future is unknowable, and we have a task as human beings, even as if you believe in religion, we have a calling from God to live our life by the light of our conscience, but as fully as possible. So it is a direct call to each individual. But for many people this is scary. They find it difficult to allow that space to the individual. Even though to fully realize our human being, to fully realize our conscience, we actually need that freedom to develop ourselves. So I think on a very basic level, this is something that people can understand, and it speaks to something in our nature. But as social animals all over the world, we are terrified by this idea of freedom, of uncertainty, of allowing people to live by their own lights. Then you have also the powerful emotions of envy, and also of curiousness. We like to stick our noses in other people's affairs. We like to tell others what to do rather than face our own problems. So I think at that very human level, the problems that we face in Pakistan are the problems liberals face all over the world. As an outsider looking at this, obviously, you feel that there's something deeply wrong when people are killed just because they belong to a different sect, because they belong to a different community. That cannot be good for a society. I don't think we can build a peaceful society by going after individual communities by violence. Is the violence really going to further our aim of a peaceful society, of a harmonious society? I believe violence doesn't do that. You have then also a cycle of killings and counter-killings, violence and counter-violence, and everybody at some point starts feeling we are only defending ourselves. So to bring that back into a more peaceful situation is challenging. When people feel threatened by violence, they feel much more keenly the general uncertainty of life. To promote freedom, you need to give people also the certainty that we can tolerate dissent, diversity. We give each other the space to be different, as long as we behave according to the laws, as long as we don't harm each other. When violence is in the society, people start harming each other. So there is a fear that we cannot abandon control. So yes, at the current situation, that is, I think, the biggest problems and the biggest problem and threat we face. I believe that the democratic process allows the people to express themselves. So if Pakistani society in its majority wants a more peaceful society, the democratic process will enable them to do that. And it may not happen from today to tomorrow. It will not be achieved in one election, but it will be achieved through the process of election. Because in the end, democracy does affirm it's your vote that counts. The government is responsible to you, and after the end of its term, you can choose a different one if you are dissatisfied. So that process of being able to get rid of leaders you don't agree with leaders who haven't done what they promised to do or who haven't brought stability that the country needs, that process over time has the potential to transform society. There's very often an excessive influence of politics and the bureaucracy on the economy. Governments are needed to do many things. While I believe in a free market economy, I also believe that the governments are important for it. But you do not need government bureaucrats to run airlines, to run ports. So there's many things. to run hotels. There's many economic activities that at the moment the governments in Pakistan and in India and Bangladesh and elsewhere do that are not the original tasks of governments, of bureaucrats, and where they are usually far worse than a private entrepreneur. A private businessman uses his own money. A bureaucrat uses other people's, your money. Who will be more careful with the investment? I think the answer is obvious. So taking the government out of activities that are not its core job, making sure that the government provides the power, the roads, the water, that is important. So getting rid of government companies and use the money to build up the infrastructure, that would be probably a very wise move, a very wise reform. Just go out and see what sort of economic dynamism even the poor have, how they will use the opportunities if they are only given them. What they need is not handouts, what they need is very often security. What they need is a government that is fair to them. But ask any street vendor, any sabzi wala, any chai wala, what his relation with the police is. You can usually ask him a figure. It will be probably 1,000 rupees per month or more. And then compute that. There's lakhs of chai walas and sabzi walas in Karachi. And each of them has to pay 1,000 or 2,000 rupees a month. Now do the numbers. We're talking of hundreds of millions of rupees that go from these relatively poor micro-entrepreneurs to police and bureaucracy. That's a huge amount of taxation. And it's not even taxation because it goes into the personal pockets. So working on these issues, making regulation simpler, that their business is legal, that they are not exposed to corruption because they violate some obscure rule, and that they can get a simple business license, that a small shop can register itself in his local municipality in half an hour. These are reforms that would really make a difference for the economic life of the poor and for the economic life of the nation.